We were supposed to get married in 12 days. The venue was booked. The dress was tailored. The invitations had already been mailed out. Everything was set for the happiest day of my life. But instead, I sat alone in my apartment with my phone face down, my engagement ring on the counter, and my heart somewhere between shame and disbelief. He found out. Not just the headlines of my past, but the details. The parts I had kept vague on purpose. The ones I thought didn't matter anymore. The truth I'd been too afraid to share. And now, I had nothing left but silence and regret. My name is Rachel. I'm 32. I've always believed people should be honest about who they are. But there's a difference between honesty and full disclosure. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that omission wasn't betrayal. That my past didn't define me. That what I'd done before meeting Adam wasn't his business as long as I was loyal to him. I never lied. Not exactly. But I didn't volunteer everything either. Especially not the number. We met at a friend's party 5 years ago. I was 27, just beginning to put a different life together. One that didn't revolve around alcohol-fueled weekends, short-lived flings, and early morning walks of shame. I'd had my wild years. College and most of my 20s were a blur of experiences I don't regret but wouldn't want to relive. I wasn't broken. I wasn't ashamed. But I knew not everyone would understand. Adam was different, steady, respectful. A little reserved but warm once he opened up. He had this quiet, old-school energy, like a man who fixed things himself and knew how to build a fire. Our first date was at a bookstore cafe. He bought me tea and asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. I knew from that night that if I wanted to keep him, I'd have to leave some parts of myself in the past. So when the subject of exes came up, I tread carefully. I told him I'd dated around. That I'd had a few serious relationships and a handful of mistakes. He didn't press. He smiled and said, "We've all got baggage." And I left it at that. We built something beautiful. A calm, quiet love. Vacations that felt like breath. Sunday mornings reading in bed. Dinners cooked together in silence and laughter. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. Not desired, treasured. Safe. I never once thought about stepping out. I was all in, and I thought that was enough. Until he found the podcast, it wasn't even about me directly. A friend from my college days was interviewed on a popular relationship podcast. She told stories, funny ones, wild nights, and the girls she used to run with. She never used my full name, just Rach from the dorms. But she painted a picture. And Adam listened. He didn't come to me angry. He came with headphones in his hand and hurt in his eyes. "Do you want to tell me about this?" he asked, voice calm. I listened. My stomach sank with every word. My friend's voice, cheerful and nostalgic, talking about nights we barely remembered and the chaos we used to live in. She mentioned numbers, close to mine. Close enough that Adam could do the math. When it ended, I tried to explain. That was years ago. I was a different person. That's not who I am anymore. But it was who you were, he said quietly. And you didn't tell me. I tried to tell him I didn't lie, that I didn't think it mattered, that I didn't want to burden our relationship with things I'd already left behind. But he wasn't listening to the words anymore. He was listening to what I hadn't said. And in that silence between us, something shifted. Something cracked. "I don't care about the number, Rachel," he said. "I care that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." And just like that, the man who'd once promised me forever put the ring back in its box and walked out. The worst part wasn't that he left. It was how quiet it was when he did. No yelling, no slammed doors, just the slow click of the door closing behind him and the soft, deliberate silence that followed. A silence that said, "This isn't rage. It's disappointment. It's grief." And somehow that cut deeper. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with my knees to my chest and stared at the ring box he left on the kitchen table. My dress was still hanging in the hallway closet. The catering deposit was non-refundable. My mom had already flown in early to help with the final details. And all I could think about was how fast something can die when truth finally has its say. I called him the next day. He didn't answer. I sent a message. Short, direct, full of guilt. He read it, didn't respond. I sent another, longer. Still nothing. I tried calling again that night, and it rang once before going straight to voicemail. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to get the chance to fix this. The fallout was worse than I imagined. My parents were confused, heartbroken. My mom asked what happened, and I told her the truth. She was stunned. Not because of my past, but because I'd hidden it from him. "You should have trusted him," she said gently. "You can't build a marriage on selective truth." Friends were divided. Some supported me, told me that I had the right to privacy, that my history was mine. Others were harsher. "You knew the kind of guy he was. You knew he'd care. And you didn't give him a choice." And that stung. Because it was true. I didn't give him a choice. I decided for both of us that what I'd done in the past wouldn't matter. And now I was paying for it. I thought I'd hear from him eventually. That maybe, once the shock faded, he'd call. That we'd sit down, have the hard talk, cry, yell, maybe even rebuild. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And still, nothing. I found out through a mutual friend that he moved out of the apartment we'd leased together. He broke the lease early, got a new place across town. Returned the few items of mine that had been left at his. No note, no message. Just a box on my doorstep with my hoodie, my books, a framed photo of us from our first vacation. Face down. That was when I stopped hoping. I tried to move on. Went to therapy. Picked up a new project at work. Signed up for yoga. Cut my hair. Deleted old photos. Did all the things you're supposed to do when you're trying to turn the page. But grief isn't linear. It loops. And some days I felt okay. Other days, I'd pass a couple on the street holding hands, and it would gut me. Because for the first time in my life, I had built something real. I hadn't just been loved. I had been safe. And I lost it. Not because I cheated. Not because I lied. But because I hid. I let fear decide what he deserved to know. And he wasn't punishing me. He was protecting himself. 3 months later, I saw him again. It was at a bookstore, of all places. Fitting, I guess, since that's where we had our first date. I didn't recognize her at first. The woman he was with. She was laughing at something he said. He looked at peace. No weight in his shoulders. No heaviness in his eyes. I froze behind a shelf and watched them browse together like they'd done it 100 times. Like she'd always been the one. And then she reached for his hand and he didn't flinch. He smiled, pressed a kiss to her temple. I left before he saw me. Cried in my car for an hour. Not because I hated her. Not even because I was jealous. But because he looked free. And I wasn't. I tried dating again. Just to see. Just to prove to myself I could. But every man I met felt like a ghost wearing a stranger's face. I went on 3 dates with a guy named Colin. He was sweet. Funny. Asked about my favorite books, held the door open, offered to split dessert. But when he leaned in to kiss me at the end of the 3rd date, I felt nothing. Not even fear or guilt. Just absence. Like kissing through a window. I think part of me was still waiting. Even after seeing Adam with her. Even after the silence. I kept thinking, he'll call. He'll realize this doesn't define me. He'll come back. But he didn't. And the more time passed, the clearer it became that he was never going to. One night, I had a dream we were sitting on the floor of our old apartment, eating takeout like we used to. Pizza, garlic knots, a movie playing in the background. I asked him if he missed me. He didn't answer. just took a bite of pizza and stared at me, eyes soft and sad. And then he said, I gave you a future, and you didn't trust me with your past. I woke up crying. That sentence followed me for days. Because it was true. He offered me forever. I gave him a curated version of myself, the part I thought was acceptable. And when he discovered the rest, it felt like betrayal. There's something uniquely painful about being left not for what you did, but for what you didn't say. Because there's no argument to win, no defense to mount. Just the realization that silence can hurt just as much as lies. Eventually, I stopped checking his social media, stopped replaying our conversations, stopped writing unsent letters, but I never stopped loving him. Not in the way I did when we were together, that warm, immediate affection, but in the way you love a place you can't return to, with longing, with gratitude, with the ache of a door you closed and can never open again. The last time I heard his name was at a friend's engagement party. Someone mentioned he and Claire had just moved in together, that they were talking about marriage, not officially, but seriously. I smiled and nodded, said I was happy for him, and I meant it. But later that night, alone in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, I'm sorry. As if somehow across town he could still hear me. People always say you should be honest in relationships, that if someone really loves you, they'll accept your whole truth. But what they don't talk about is the fear, the real, bone-deep fear, that the person you love won't, that your truth will be too heavy, that they'll see your past and not your present. And so, we omit. We downplay. We rewrite history in gentler terms, hoping our partners will never ask for the full version, until they do. And then it's too late. I've forgiven myself, mostly. I know I'm not the same girl I was in my early 20s. I know that my value doesn't hinge on a number. But I also know that Adam deserved to make an informed choice. And I didn't give him that. I robbed him of his right to decide if he could love all of me. So he left. Not because he was cruel, not because he was judgmental, but because I wasn't honest. And now I live with the space he left behind. Quiet, clean, permanent.